Sorry that we're a little late starting this morning, but we're very excited to see you here and be part of our day here at Queen's Park. We would like to thank everyone who has joined us this morning for either in person joining us or watching from your offices, and especially to MPP Christine Elliott for enabling us to be here. We'd also like to thank the members of our community who are here today to help us ensure our voice is heard by the members of this legislature. My name is Margriet Eigenraam, and I'm the Secretary of aHUS Canada, a patient support group for the ultra-rare, life-threatening genetic disease known as atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome, or also known as aHUS. With me here is my husband, Michael Eigenraam, who is an aHUS patient and also vice chair. Sonia Girato is on the end. She is our treasurer. And we all volunteer for aHUS Canada. And beside me is Sonia's son, Joshua, who also lives with atypical aHUS. About 30 people in Ontario live with this disease. aHUS is caused by chronic, uncontrolled activation of the complement system, a part of the body's natural immune system. As a result, the immune system attacks the body's unhealthy and healthy cells, damaging the blood vessels, which can cause abnormal blood clotting. The presence of blood clots causes damage to organs, leading to heart attack, stroke, kidney failure, and death. aHUS strikes without warning. In 2002, we thought Michael had the flu, but he became very sick and was rushed to emergency, where he was misdiagnosed with a similar disease to aHUS. He was in hospital over a month, receiving many plasma treatments. He lost both kidneys and needed dialysis. In total, he spent more than 5 months in the hospital, including several days in the ICU, and was near death a few times because of severe complications such as dangerously high blood pressure, a mini stroke, and internal bleeding following a kidney biopsy. In 2006, I donated my kidney to him, but the transplant failed as the disease returned despite more plasma. In 2011, Michael was properly diagnosed with atypical aHUS, but he was told that he could not receive another transplant unless aHUS was controlled. Soliris is currently the only Health Canada approved life-saving drug that exists for atypical aHUS. Soliris helps to prevent and restore the loss of kidney function. It has also transformed the management of this disease by opening up the possibility of kidney transplants for patients like Michael. Without Soliris, aHUS and dialysis cause Michael to experience severe fatigue and many other symptoms and health risks. This has prevented him from working and significantly affects his quality of life. For most of their lives, our teenage children have never experienced a healthy dad, which has impacted them greatly. We are very concerned that plasma therapy is still predominantly used in Ontario to treat atypical aHUS. It is not studied or proven to be safe or effective. Despite plasma therapy, 65% of patients die, need dialysis, or have permanent kidney damage within the first year of diagnosis. We have met with many government officials and are very concerned about what we have heard from some. We've been told that plasma is an appropriate treatment for atypical aHUS. If this was true, my husband Michael would not have lost his kidneys or my donated kidney, and he would be healthy and would be able to work. We have heard the safety of Soliris called into question, even while Health Canada approved it for safety and Ontario is supplying it to patients of another rare disease with PNH. We find this very confusing. We chose this week to come to the legislature because Saturday is International Rare Disease Day. No one chooses to have a rare disease, but by withholding funding, the Ontario government has turned its back on the lives of patients with these kinds of rare diseases. Unfortunately, we are not the first rare disease group to come to the legislature pleading for our lives because we can't access an approved, safe, and effective treatment.
Good morning. We've been told that public funding of Soliris in Ontario has not been granted because there is a lack of clinical data. In fact, clinical information has been provided to the Ontario government by aHUS Canada medical experts, and the manufacturer, which demonstrates that Solaris has significant improvement in patient outcomes over plasma therapy. With Solaris, 90% of aHUS patients have normal blood levels, showing the disease is under control. Studies show that patients on Solaris can discontinue plasma and dialysis therapies, have improved kidney function, reduced blood vessel damage, and decreased risk of blood clots. Other jurisdictions throughout the world, including the province of Quebec, already make Solaris accessible through public funding based on the same clinical data. Just a few weeks ago in the UK, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence issued its final guidance on Solaris, recommending funding for all aHUS patients there. It called Solaris a significant innovation for a disease with a high unmet clinical need, a clinical need clearly not met by plasma therapy. Yes, the drug is expensive, but if you look at the small, finite number of patients and what is currently being spent on unproven treatments, you will see that it is affordable. How much does plasma therapy cost? How much does dialysis cost? How much do routine and emergency hospital visits cost because we are not on an appropriate treatment? How much is it costing every year we can't work? Every year we don't pay income taxes? According to the Canadian Organization for Rare Disorders in Canada, less than 1% of our public drug budgets are allocated to drugs for rare diseases. In Europe, the impact in countries with the very best access to rare disease drugs is still only about 2.5 to 3.5% of all drug costs. While Solaris is expensive, by denying aHUS patients this drug, the Ontario government is jeopardizing our health and putting a price on our lives. While we agree that the government should have some say regarding the drug approval process, we believe that physicians know best which treatments patients need. We are told there is a process that needs to be followed, but with all due respect, this has been a very long process and lives are at risk. It's been 2 years since the approval was granted by Health Canada for Solaris, 18 months since the Common Drug Review's recommendation, and 13 months since 2 CED recommendations were made. This issue is not political. It has support from all parties. This is about doing the right thing for Ontarians. We are pleading with the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care and the Premier of this province to help us. Our supporters have emailed thousands of letters to the Minister and Premier. We have collected signatures of thousands of Ontarians. Here's the evidence, showing that even though we have a rare disease, our efforts and requests of the government have gained widespread support across the province. We are here today to ask that this important medication be made available to all aHUS patients who require it to live a healthy life. We ask the Ontario government to acknowledge the strong clinical data supporting Solaris for aHUS, and that you move quickly to ensure that our community has access to this treatment. Sonia Girato and her son Joshua have seen firsthand how Solaris can save and sustain lives, and will now share their story.
Good morning. My family and I know all too well the devastating impacts of aHUS. Joshua was diagnosed with aHUS in March of 2012. At first, in 2006, Josh was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called Evans syndrome. Despite this, he lived a healthy life and without medication until 2012. I noticed one day that the whites of his eyes were yellow, and within 24 hours, Joshua was completely jaundiced. He was admitted to the hospital for sick children, where he spent 5 weeks, including one in critical care, while the doctors there tried to stop his blood loss and confirm a diagnosis. We soon found out it was aHUS. While in the hospital, Josh experienced life-threatening complications, including internal bleeding, kidney failure, a blood clot, and underwent a kidney biopsy and surgery to insert a central line IV to continue receiving transfusions, dialysis, and plasmapheresis for several hours each day in order to combat the debilitating symptoms of aHUS. He reached a point within his first week where he didn't recognize us, couldn't speak or hold his head up. He was placed on many medications while he was in hospital, including a very high dose of prednisone, which is a steroid, blood pressure pills, medications to protect the lining of the stomach, and 2 shots daily of blood thinners. The light at the end of the tunnel came when Joshua's doctor offered him an opportunity to enter a clinical study for Solaris. Soon after beginning treatment, Joshua's kidney function was fully restored and his health improved with little impact on his day-to-day life. Before starting Solaris, Joshua's biggest wish was to return to school and be with his friends, something that he still denies, he said, to this day. At the end of April 2012, his wish came true. Today, Joshua has a paper route, he plays soccer and the drums. For our family, access to Solaris meant that we got our little boy back. And most importantly, Joshua got his life back. Now we want the same for everyone who lives with this devastating disease. Although we didn't think it at the time, Dr. Harvey was correct. He was one of the lucky ones. He got access through a clinical trial, but there are others, adults and children, battling this disease who are not as lucky. aHUS is a genetic disease, and nearly half of the patients are children. There are families across Ontario whose lives have been greatly impacted by this disease. One child even lost parts of limbs, intestines, and complete kidney function. If Solaris were funded by the government before he went through this ordeal, the damage could have been prevented. One Ontario patient has lost access to Solaris temporarily. She was no longer able to access the drug through private insurance and relapsed and was hospitalized. The manufacturer stepped in to ensure she could stay on therapy. Other adults in Ontario have completely lost their kidney function to aHUS. One woman lost both her kidneys before Solaris was approved for her. Another patient who lost her kidneys to this disease was ready to receive a donated kidney, but because approximately 90% of kidney transplants fail in aHUS patients that are not on Solaris, she is unfortunately not eligible to undergo this procedure until she's on the drug. The acute manner in which Solaris presents means that any patient whose disease is not controlled by this medicine might suddenly be at risk of catastrophic outcomes. aHUS can attack at any time, causing a patient to go into crisis. In a province where the claim that the best care will be given for patients at risk of losing life, limb, or organ, our government has gravely failed us. And by remaining complacent ourselves, we fail each other.
When I was sick and in the hospital, it was a very scary experience. I thought that I might die. And I know my family was very worried about what was going to happen to me. Once I started Solaris, I got healthier, and now I'm back at school, doing the things I love. My life is pretty much back to normal. I realize how lucky I was to have access to Solaris when I did, and I want other kids and adults with aHUS to be able to get it too.
An adult patient here with us, Tony Vernon, she's sitting here with us, is also living with kidney failure as a result of this disease and needs a kidney transplant. She has a donor lined up, but is unable to go through with the transplant unless she has the appropriate treatment to control aHUS. This situation is unacceptable since there is a pharmaceutical treatment available which would allow her to have this transplant, but the province will not fund it. Another patient, Joanne Curlow, who was diagnosed last summer, cannot be here because she is at hospital having dialysis due to kidney failure caused by aHUS. Her physician was denied funding of Solaris twice. Joanne waited so long for access that the delay caused her kidneys to sustain extensive damage. Receiving Solaris sooner would have prevented that damage. After being hospitalized with multiple attacks of pancreatitis caused by aHUS, the government finally made Solaris accessible to her for up to 6 months through a mechanism called the Compassionate Review Policy. This temporary funding was only a band-aid solution that forced patients to wait until their health and very lives are at risk. Solaris has been proven to help repair kidney damaged by aHUS, but it's only time will tell if it's too late to save Joanne's organs. The good news is that Joanne is feeling much better. As long as she is on this therapy, she has hope that her kidney function will be restored. These stories represent just a sample of the journeys patients face with this disease. Solaris was approved 2 years ago for aHUS, and this is far too long for our community to wait for access. We are asking the Ontario government to acknowledge the evidence accepted by specialists and countries worldwide, and fund Solaris for patients who need it so that damage to organs and limbs can be prevented and lives be saved. Thank you for your attention to our stories. We're happy to take any questions now from the media, but would first like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Nigel Rawson, a pharmaceutical policy researcher who has recently written an article for the Canadian Health Policy Journal, which illustrates the challenges that rare disease communities face with respect to access to treatment. He's here with us today. His article is in your media kits and available online. Dr. Rawson is happy to take questions from the media now or following question period. Thank you.
How much does Solaris cost? What would it cost an individual who was looking to take it?
The cost of Solaris, as far as we know, the list price is in approximately $500,000 per year per patient. But the provinces have not begun negotiating on the price, so we don't know what the final price would be.
And how many patients in Ontario have aHUS?
We estimate approximately 30.
You talked about the 2-year wait period from when it was approved by Health Canada. Now, if you guys felt like you hadn't been waiting for 2 years, what do you feel like the repercussions are for having that wait time? What's the impact of that?
The patients that need the drug won't have access during that time. And if it's any longer, any patients at risk suffer from that extra risk.
Can you maybe just elaborate a bit on what that extra risk is? I mean,
Well, we have three. We spoke about three particular patients who have all gone into crisis within the last 2 years. And their repercussions are that they've lost their kidneys, and there's a child who's lost more than that.
and that's typical of a 2-year wait time. That's what
No,
patients...
you asked, what could have been prevented in that 2-year span, or what are some of the outcomes of that 2-year wait. There's 3 people whose lives have been affected gravely by that wait.
Just to let you know that when you get this disease, kidney failure could happen as quickly as like 2 weeks.
So it really varies.
It's a
depending
very
on...
devastating, like as soon as you have the disease, you could have organ damage like immediately. So if people have to wait a long time, even let's say a month, to get access, there could be great kidney damage being done, or even other damage like stroke or heart attack.
In our case, we didn't know that Josh had aHUS, so it was a, we call it a aHUS episode. I don't know if anyone's seen that show, of all the ologies coming into CCU and trying to figure out what it could be and knocking off what it wasn't. So that wait period was almost 3 weeks before we had a final decision. That's an issue in and of itself that we are also advocating for. But if you don't know that you have the disease, like we didn't, there's a process that you have to go through to find out what the disease is. So once you get there, you may have already suffered some of those complications. Did that answer your question? Are we good? Anyone have any questions? Tony, did you want to say anything? Did you want to speak to your wait period? Did you want to speak to her about your wait period?